All right, guys, so let's begin. Okay. So today we're looking at users, groups, and permissions. All right. I know most of you read the chapter already, so it shouldn't be anything too new. But if you have any questions, feel free to stop me. Let's read the intro. So through the combination of user accounts, groups, and NTFS permissions, Windows provides incredibly powerful file and folder security. This group user NTFS combination scales from a single computer up to a network of computers spanning the world. When learning about users, groups, and NTFS permissions, it's helpful to think about a single PC. To that end, this chapter focuses on Windows security from the point of view of a single or standalone machine. So even if we're going to be talking about sharing and multiple users, everything in that chapter actually assumes that you have a standalone machine not connected to any network or not even connected to the internet. All right. So it's really going to be talking about sharing between the user accounts on a single PC. But the same concepts apply when you scale up to the larger, to a network, right? Whether it be a small home network or a larger network like the internet. So the concepts apply across into chapter 21, where we look at networking. All right. So the chapter begins by looking at users, accounts, passwords, and groups, all of what you should already be familiar with. And then we look at the security or the NTFS permissions and the security we get from it. All right. Authentication with users and groups. Security begins with a user account, that is security within a computer. A unique combination of a username and an associated password stored in some database on your computer that grants the user access to the system. Although we normally assign a user account to a human user, user accounts are also assigned to everything that runs programs on your computer. For example, every Windows system has a system account that Windows uses when it runs programs. And we saw that on Monday when we were looking at the task manager. I can probably put it up now. Right, if we look at the users that actually start the task, actually let's not jump into that now. Right, but if you look at the users that start the task, you will notice that some are started by your user, some are started by the system, some are started by the network. All right. So Windows has a system account that it uses when it runs programs. Two mechanisms enable user account security, and that is authentication and authorization. Can anybody explain that for me? If somebody can explain that, it'll save me from reading the next section or going through it. Can anybody explain the difference between authentication and authorization? Tell me what they are.
Okay, authentication is when you use a username and a password to log onto a system. So it will give you access. And authorization is, okay, once you have access to that particular computer, what can you do with the files on the computer? That would be authorization.
Okay, you sort of combine both of them into authentication, into authorization, right? So the difference between them, it can be a little bit difficult to understand, but authentication is actually not granting access. Authentication is just making sure that you are who you say you are. So authentication is finding out who is the user. Is it Leonard? Is it Clyde? Is it Kirov? Is it Cody? Is it Clemos? Right? And the way we identify who we are is by our username and by knowing the password for that user account. All right, so we click on the user account and we know the password. It assumes that only the particular user that is being authenticated has the password to that account. So we assume that that is the user logging in. Everybody get that? And then, hold on, I see Janelle coming in now. And then authorization basically gives you the permissions as to what you can do on that particular system. Sorry guys, I was waiting a minute. I see Janelle connecting the audio, so let me just hold on for. All right. But everybody understand the difference between the authentication and authorization. She can disconnect it. Yeah, any questions on those two? So authentication is a process of identifying and granting access to some user, usually a person who is trying to access the system. In Windows, authentication is most commonly handled by a password-protected user account. Straightforward. Once a user authenticates, he or she needs authorization. So on the note here, they say authentication is a process of giving user access to the system, right? Now, that is actually not true, right? I broke it down and I told you exactly what it is, and it results in you getting access to the system. But authentication is really identifying who is accessing the system, right? And then even if you get access to the system, you can access it and do absolutely nothing, right? Or you might get authenticated and the authentication might deny you access, right? So authentication doesn't automatically give you access. Your authentication could deny you access in a situation where, let's say, you no longer granted permission to access the network, so they lock you out of it. That would be authenticating you but denying you access. All right, so just as a note to clarify that here. All right, so once a user authenticates, he or she needs authorization. And that is a process that defines what resources an authenticated user may access and what he or she may do with those resources. Authorization for Windows files and folders is controlled by the NTFS file system, which assigns permissions to users and groups. These permissions define exactly what a user may do to a resource in a system. All right, I'm not gonna go through authentication in detail. I think everybody knows what that is in terms of a user account and a password. Basically, every user that uses a system ideally should have their own account with a secured password that they share with nobody, right? And that is the only way that the system can authenticate individual users on a computer. All right. I also don't think I need to go through the steps to create a strong password with you guys. And really and truly, if you want to use weak passwords, some people actually prefer that because they're easier to remember. That is up to you. But everybody understand what we mean by a strong password and how you would actually develop a strong password. Yes? As technicians, even though you don't put it into practice, you need to know that. So let me know if everybody have that under control. So a strong password, at least 8 characters in length, including letters, numbers, and symbols. So not only punctuation symbols, but dollar signs, hashtags, and the rest will equate to a strong password, basically, all right? CompTIA also recommends, and places with very high or intense security also recommend that users change password at regular intervals. I'm not sure if you guys use certain platforms or services that force you to change your password every month or every couple of logins, right? I know NBD Mo Banking was very annoying for that in the past. I think they've updated that policy, right? But you can actually, within a Windows or with actually almost any computer system, set up a password expiration policy that forces a user to select a new password either after X amount of logins or after X amount of time, all right? That can be a problem for most users because people tend to forget or tend to use one password and forget everything else, right? then we have a tip, and I'm sure everybody knows the tip. Use your generic password and add a number at the end, change the number every time, right? Those should be generic information that you should have gathered from just using computers on a daily. In chapter 28, we go through how you actually set policies, such as how to enforce things like you must change your password after such amount of time, and other policies on the system, right? Local policies and group policies. All right, let's move on. So we know what a user is on the computer. What is a group? Can anybody tell me what is a group? Okay. Well, a group, the definition here is a container that holds user accounts and defines the capabilities of its members. So most of us are familiar with one group in our computer. Can you tell me what group you're familiar with? Most people are familiar with the administrators group. Here's how groups work, basically. Let's say we work for a business, right? It's a fairly large company. That company has a marketing department, a production department, and accounts department. All right. The people that work in marketing could be placed in a group called marketing. And what you can do is you can simply assign permissions rather than to individual users to groups, right? So let's say you have a file that you want all people who work in marketing to access. You simply share it with the marketing group rather than the 10 individual people that work within the marketing department, right? So you would create a group for your marketing department, you'd create a group for your accounts department, you'd create a group for your production department. And then you could share files and assign other permissions, right? Or authorize certain permissions on the system on a group basis rather than to an individual layer, to an individual user, right? One of the most popular groups on the system is an administrator. Basically, when you make somebody an administrator on the computer, what you basically do is you take their user account and you place it in the administrators group. So it treats them as an administrator like any other on the computer. Everybody understand that, right? What a group is. And I'll show you a little later on how we actually set up groups, modify groups, and add users to groups within the control panel or the administrative tool. Let's just run through it. So a single account can be a member of multiple groups. So you can be a member of the marketing group and a member of the production group as well. All right. In that case, anything that's shared with the marketing group, you would get authorization to access it. And anything that's shared with the production group, you will also get permission. But somebody who is just in the marketing group would not be able to access the production group data. All right. So groups are an efficient way of managing multiple users, especially when you're dealing with a whole network of accounts. Standalone computers rely on groups too, though Windows obscures this a little, especially with home users. Groups make Windows administration much easier in two ways. First, you can assign a certain level of access for a file or folder to a group instead of just a single user. And you can make, just like I was saying, you can make different groups and share the stuff with everybody in that group. If a person quits, you don't need to worry about assigning all of the proper access levels when you create a new account for his or her replacement. After you make an account for the new person, just add his or her account to the appropriate access group. And also, it makes it easier rather than unsharing everything with that person. You simply remove their user account from the group if they change roles or leave the job, so that even if they have access, they no longer have permission to, even if they are recognized, right, and they can be authenticated, they no longer have access to the files and folders that the group previously had access to. or that they had access to in the group. Second, Windows provides numerous built-in groups with various access levels already predetermined, and we'll look at that in a little bit. While all versions of Windows come with a large number of these built-in groups, Windows editions aimed at home users handle these very differently than more advanced versions. For starters, make sure you're aware of these groups for the exam. As I mentioned, the main one is the administrators group. Any account that is a member of the administrators group has complete administrator privileges. Administrator privileges grant complete control over the machine. It is common for the primary user of a Windows system to have her account in the administrators group. Now, one thing that you need to know is you need at least one person in the administrators group on any computer. You need at least one administrator. Right? And that administrator has all power over the system, or anybody in the administrators group actually has all power over the system. Another group is the power users, and they recommend that for everyday users that need general access, like if it's your computer, while you should have an administrator account, that should not be the account you use every day. You should actually be using a power user account, simply for safety and security reasons, and we'll discuss that in a minute. But members of the power users group are almost as powerful as members of the administrators group, but they cannot install new devices or access other users' files and folders unless the files or folders specifically provide them access through sharing. Users are regular users on the computer. Members of the users group cannot edit the registry or access critical system files. They can create groups, but can manage only those they create. Members of the users group are called standard users. So every user you create after the administrator after the main user, after the main administrator, would usually fall into the users group, because especially in earlier versions of Windows, when you create a user, right, it doesn't give you the option to put them in administrator or power user or users or guests, right? It just gives you the option for administrator and standard user. Am I right? Anybody ever created a user on a computer before?
You're correct.
Right. But then today we're going to learn how you would actually use the other groups and even create groups of your own, right? Which is a bit more advanced, and most average users don't get into that. All right. I think we know what happens, right, when we change somebody from a standard user to an administrator, right? So if we take Jane account from administrator to standard user, we take her out of the administrator group and place her into the users group. Nothing will happen with her personal files or folders, but what she can do on the computer will change a lot. And the guest group enables someone who does not have an account on that system to log in by using a guest account. All right, you might use this feature at a party, for example, to provide casual internet access to guests, or at a library terminal. Most often, the guest account remains disabled. And how do you disable or enable the guest account? The control panel provides you an easy way for the user account. You can enable the guest, but we're also going to see how we would do that in a more manual way. More manual and more powerful way. Configuring users and groups. Configuring local users and local groups requires tools in Windows for creating and managing users and groups. Every version of Windows includes either one or two users and group management tools. Most editions of Windows include a control panel applet called user accounts, and that's where we typically go to configure our users. The more advanced Windows editions include a second, more advanced utility called local users and groups. And you'll find that in the computer management console in administrative tools. So, and of course, to create and manage users, you must have administrator privileges. All right, so let's see what that looks like. This is the user accounts. I'm sure you guys are familiar with the user accounts. That's the user accounts look like Windows 7 and up, right? And From there, you can manage this user, change the account name, change the account type, or you can manage another account, such as create a new user account or change the permissions on another account, right? And how do we access the user accounts? Everybody knows. So let's go the long way. The long way is we go for the control panel. All right. Sorry, go up on the wrong screen, right? So we would go to the control panel, administrative tools. Sorry, no, we're going to user accounts. So control panel user accounts. That's the typical place we go to manage the users, right? We can change the account type, manage another account, make changes in the settings. All right. The other tool is the local users and groups found in the computer management utility. Right. So let's look at that one. So control panel. All right. This time we go to administrative tools. All right, and computer management. Sorry, I have multiple screens and they just open up where they want. Okay. Everybody can see the computer management utility here? Yes? And the local users and groups, applet. Everybody with me? Everybody can see that? Local users and groups in the computer management. If I click on users, it shows me the users on that computer. You can see I have an administrator account that's disabled. Right? I have my main account for business. My guest account is disabled. There's also a default account managed by the system. So that account is essentially what any new users will be configured with, right? The settings in that account. That's the guest account, again, is disabled. My computer doesn't allow guests. And then you have a number of these home group users. And that is for, again, if you're using a home group, these users are for apps, QuickBooks specifically, and updating apps, utility account, that one is disabled. But these are additional accounts you don't have access to, but essentially the system will use it, or the various apps will use it as needed. And then we have my main account that I use to log in, right? So that's the user accounts. For groups now, we have a number of different groups, right? Access control assistance operators, administrators, backup operators, cryptographic operators, and a whole lot more, right? Essentially, you can create new groups to configure them the way you like, right? So I could right-click on groups, create a new group here, right? To create a new group. If you notice, I have a specific group here. That group is the DS group, and that's the name of my company, Digital Solutions. So people I want to share generic things on my computer with, essentially, I just dump them in that group. For now, it's really just me. Everybody uses my account or other systems on the network. But even on the network, you'll find that they are part of that standard DS group. All right. So you would create your groups, like your accounts, your production, your marketing, your management, and then you would assign your users to a particular group. So let me just show you how we would do that. So let's say this user, my user account, for instance. If I right-click on it, and I go to properties, well, first of all, if I right click on it, you can see I can perform a few tasks. I can set a password. All right. I can delete rename, but let's go to properties. All right. So you can see my password here never expires. All right. And we have a few other options. And currently, I'm a member of 3 groups. The administrators group, I'm the administrator on that system. I'm also a member of the DS group, as I mentioned earlier, and I'm also a member of the home users group. All right. If I wanted to, if I wanted to become a member of any group, so let's say I wanted to become a member of the replicator group, for instance. All right. Or let's create a new group. Let's just do that. Let's create a new group. Let's call that group A+. All right. And we're going to say that's for our A+ class. All right. I could actually add myself. All right. Search for my user here. Sorry. Right. And add the user right directly to the A+ group here. So let me do it that way. I added it. Right. I could remove it there as well. Create. Sorry, I cannot use the plus in name. So let's call it A, the A group, right? Hope I can use one letter. Create. All right, close. So now we have the A group, right, for our A+ class that we just created. Now, if I go there to users, I did add myself to the A group. If I go to properties, okay, it didn't get added. But so let's do it that way. So we can add the A group. Let's search, check names, right? Okay. And now I'm a member of the A group as well as the administrators group and the DS and the home users group. Apply. I know I had added it, it wasn't showing it, but anyway, okay. I guess I needed to refresh. So I could have refreshed, sorry. That's why it wasn't showing it. So yeah, so I'm a member of A group. If I wanted to remove, let's say I was no longer employed in the A department, I could simply remove that user from the A group and it would simply lose all permissions that the A group granted it. So that basically is how you would manage users and groups on a more in-depth level. Everybody understand that? Straightforward enough, right?
Yes.
Okay. So yeah, that's pretty much it for that. So let's continue. All right, I'm not gonna go through managing users in Windows Vista and all of the other operating systems because we're not dealing with those. They're no longer supported anyway. I expect you guys to read through it and understand how we would deal with the different operating systems, right? But I'm leaving that for you to work on your own time. I just showed you how you deal with it on Windows 10, right? And it will be pretty much the same on Windows 7 and well, 11 as well. Okay. Do I need to go through parental controls for you? No, I think everybody has a pretty good idea what parental controls are, right? That's where parents can control their children or employers can control their employees and essentially configure what sites you can access, what times you can access the internet or other resources and so on. All right, so I am gonna run over that. If you guys have any issues on parental controls, let me know so I can show you how it works, review it. But it's pretty straightforward. Again, we're not gonna go through managing users in Windows 7. It's pretty much the same thing. I will show you how. Let's go through managing users in Windows 8, 8.1, and 10. Because that, in addition to the way I just showed you, which is how I prefer manage users, you also have the Microsoft preferred way in Windows 10, which is through the PC settings. And it can be a little bit troublesome. Okay. All right. So managing users in Windows 8, 8.1, 10, and it applies to 11 as well. So starting with Windows 8, Microsoft shifted the focus of user accounts from local accounts to internet-wide Microsoft accounts. Windows 8 debuted the settings charm. See figure 1412. So 1412 shows you the settings charm. Right now in Windows 10, the settings charm is found right here. That's that little gear icon that you see right when you click the start button. All right. Okay. So select change PC settings from the initial charm to open up PC settings and get access to the accounts option. Note that the user account. So again, let me just show you how we would do that. So in Windows 10, we would go to start, we go to settings. Can everybody see my settings screen? Yes? All right. I'm assuming that you can see it. And then if you notice, I'm actually signing in with internet-wide Microsoft account, right? My Microsoft account, which is my Hotmail. But then the other account, the DS account, is a local account. So this is the new way that Microsoft would expect you to, with Windows 8 and up, manage their accounts, right? So no longer for the control panel, although that still works, right? And is the preferred way that gives you the most granular access to all of the settings and the groups, right? But essentially, I could add a family member or other users. If you notice, the other user that you saw from the user accounts, the digital solutions account, is actually a local account that's added, right? And you can see the other, well, it doesn't show you all of the other accounts, but it does show you the QuickBooks users. If you're going to add somebody else, you simply click add someone else and you go through the process. Microsoft will try to force you to create to sign in with a Microsoft account, right? Meaning your Hotmail or your if you opt to use another email address as your Microsoft account, right? So you'll essentially be signing with an email and a password, but you can choose to sign in with a local account, or you can actually, if you do not have access to the internet, then you can create a local account and just skip the convert into a Microsoft account option. All right. So in Windows 8 and up, you will go through the settings. It looks slightly different in Windows 8 and Windows 10, but they pretty much function the same way, right? And you would create an account. All right. It'll ask you for the person's password, or you have the option to select I don't have the password, right? And you do have the option, if you do get to it, if you have your internet disconnected, you may see this option again, depending on the version of Windows 10, because they're doing so many different things now, right? You can choose to sign in without a Microsoft account. They say not recommended, and the option is usually hidden somewhere far where you can barely make it out. But there is an option where you can sign in with a local account and not a Microsoft account. The Microsoft account does, of course, give you a few benefits. Do you guys understand the difference between a local account and a Microsoft account and the benefits that you get? I'm going to assume that you do, working with computers daily. Now, once you've created your account, whether a global or local account, Windows creates that account on the local machine. It may take a while, and it creates all of the folder structures and the local profile. And then you have a new account to sign into. All right, guys, we have less than a minute. So we're gonna stop here, take a break, and then we're gonna come back and wrap up that chapter. If you have any questions on anything, save it for when you get back in. All right. And we will discuss them. Everybody go with that?
Cool.
Yes, sir.
All right.
Okay.
So we're gonna come back in about 10 minutes. Stretch your legs, drink some water, and I'll look out for the link in a few minutes.